Pasi actually was kind enough to participate in an event for us back in the spring, and so I know you're in for a treat. Pasi is the Director General of the Center for International Mobility and Cooperation, which is part of the Finnish Ministry of Education and Culture. He is one of the leading speakers and thinkers on international education, and of course everybody wants to know what's happening in Finland, right? Finland is one of these countries that time and time again rises to the top of the international rankings. Pasi, if you've seen the report, you will have seen his commentary in Quality Counts this year. I would recommend that to you strongly. Pasi is a prolific writer as well as thinker, and most recently he published a book. This is so hot off the presses, it's practically burning my fingers. Finnish Lessons, What Can the World Learn from Educational Change in Finland? You'll have some more information about that in your packets today. So Pasi is going to speak a little bit about his perspective on both international education more broadly, what countries can learn from one another, some of the lessons from Finland, and then he's going to join Ginny for a conversation and take some questions from the audience. So Pasi, we're glad to welcome you.
Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? All right, good. First of all, it's a huge honor to be here this morning, all the way from Helsinki, Finland. And I can tell you one thing: I wouldn't be here if this was 10 years ago or 11 years ago, because that's how new the Finnish reputation to be an education nation is. I'm not here this morning to tell you that if you do what the Finns have been doing, everything will be fine in this great country. I'm not even here to tell you that Finland has the best education system in the world, because in Finland we don't really think like this, that whether you are best or not, it's not so important for us. But I would like to share a few pictures and just a very few ideas before we go to the conversation with Ginny about Finland. Is this all right? Okay. Sure. But before I do that, you can always read more about the Finnish education from my... You know, I'm so pleased about this book because this is a second run already, and it was sold out last week, so I'm happy about that. I want to start with this picture very briefly. This is my grandfather, who 98 years ago, about this time 98 years ago, left Finland like many other thousands of other people, and he decided to become American. He came here to look for better life and better education. He settled down in New Jersey, got a great education in the Brooklyn Technical College to be an engineer, joined the troops and went to the war, back to Europe. And Finland became independent in 1917, so he decided to, in early 1920s, he decided to go back to see his father and family, and as it sometimes happens, you enter the life situation that you were not expecting. So he met this woman, fell in love, got married in this order, and then my father came, and then a little bit later I came. So I could be, with a little bit different constellation of stars, I could be one of you here, American. He remained American citizen until the Second World War, and I'm showing this picture because I dedicated this book to my grandfather, only because I feel that I owe something to the people here, because many of the Finnish ideas and innovations are actually from the United States. Some people who have visited Finland told me that the whole Finnish education system looks like the system of education that great John Dewey was talking about. Yeah. So that's you have to understand that we are not here as a country, as an education nation, because of our own innovation and research and development work. This is very much based on what you have been doing here before. Just a few facts about the country. Is there anybody here who has been in Finland? Good. You know, in education meetings like this, somebody told me that there are two types of people. They are Finns and wannabe Finns. So I know that many of you probably would like to be in Finland, but here are some of the things. We are a fairly small country, about barely 6 million people, so we are like Minnesota, Colorado, some of the states. Actually, about 30 states in the United States are about the size of Finland or smaller, And many people often argue that how can we compare apples and oranges when the other one is so huge and the other one is so big? I'm always looking at America through the States and Finland, so there are many opportunities to do this. We have a parliamentary democracy. We have about 9 parties in the parliament. We have 6 parties at the moment in the government. Makes a huge difference from the point of view of education policy. We are part of the European Union now for the 16th year. We are one of the most competitive market economy in the world, and this is a kind of a conception that many people believe that Finland is somehow a planned socialist economy. This doesn't apply to Finland. We are a very strong open market economy like the United States and many other countries in Europe. We are very strong in innovation and research. Finland has the highest proportion of labor force working in research and innovation of all countries in the world. So it's a very important part of our economy as well. We are a prosperous Nordic welfare state, so we have this competitive economy and the welfare state at the same time. And we have fairly small number of poor children compared to what you have here. And the income inequality in Finland and the whole Scandinavia is much smaller than here in the United States. Here are some of the education indicators for you. You see the number of schools we have. We are spending less than 6% of our national wealth for education compared to 7.3% here in the United States and 6.1% in the rich OECD countries on average. A primary school student costs about $7,000 each year compared to about $10,000 here in the United States. We practically fund everything, all education from public funds. About 99% of K to 9 education is funded through public funds. We don't have any private schools really. All teachers in Finland have to have master's degree, and almost all the teachers and principals are unionized. And this is also kind of a misconception that people often have, that since we don't have unions in Finland, things are different. Wrong. We have a very strong teacher union, and almost practically everybody is a member of that. Some things that you need to know before I show you some photographs. First, Finland has not always been a high performer. So this is something that has happened to us during the last 2 or 3 decades. We have been progressing steadily since the 1980s to the point where in the first OECD PISA 10 years ago, we were measured as one of the highest performer in the world. Education is regarded as a civil human right in Finland. So it means that it's a very important public service. We have a presidential election going on right now, and all the candidates are saying that education is one of those things that must not be touched if we talk about where we are saving or if we are handing over public services to the private providers. So education is so deep in our society that education is a right for everybody. And teaching is one of the most wanted career choices for young people. So here are some of the pictures that you see, and I want to tell you 3 things really that I think and I hope are relevant for the meeting this morning and for the work that you are doing here. First is how do we understand the equality of educational opportunities. An important notion in Finland is that we never used excellence as a driver of our education reforms. We always wanted to build and still want to build our education system through equality and equity as a most important driver, not excellence, not the achievement, raising the bar or closing the gaps. This is not the kind of a policy thinking that we have. And some of the things that you can get out of this is, for example, how the education is funded. We have a very different funding system here in the United States and in Finland. In my country, the public funding is going to those who have special needs in terms of organizing education. Yeah? So if you have more needs, for example, if you have a school or municipality where you have more children from immigrant families or special needs or unemployed or low educated parents, normally those municipalities and schools receive more funding. Okay? And since we don't measure schools, we cannot say where the good schools or bad schools are. So this goodness or quality of performance doesn't have anything to do with the funding. It's all based on the needs of the schools and municipalities. A very different way. We are providing a healthy 3-course meal, school lunch for everybody, regardless of the parents' background or where children live. It's an everyday thing. You can see pictures here how we also use the school lunch or school meal as a part of the education for life. Healthcare is part of the school. Every school must have a nurse or doctor, and every child will be taken care of now by the new law that has been effective since the beginning of this year. Every child must be checked every year annually by the school doctor or nurse. So we have to make sure that children are also healthy, including the dental care and the mental care. So it's a very important part of the education system, this one as well. We have a very individualized education system, meaning that education has to be organized based on each and every individual's personal needs. And that's why special education, for example, is a very important part of our education provision. And the children must play. We have still a system where between the lessons we have to have normally a 15-minute break. All the children go out and they play and have fun before they come to the next class. And this is a very important part of each school day. And we rarely see schools where these recesses has been reduced or taken away. It's a very important part. And the play, to grow and learn through play, is an important aspect as well. Here you see how the variation of student performance in reading literacy in the last PISA is doing in these two countries, in Finland and the United States. The interesting thing is that if we take away the within school variation, you will see how different the schools are performing in the United States in the PISA 2009 in Finland. This shows you that the United States variation is about 5 or 6 times larger than in Finland. This means that all the schools in Finland are performing within the very narrow bar of variation over there because of the things that you saw in the beginning. And this is one of the famous pictures as well that you may have seen through the OECD PISA. You see that Finland, Canada and Korea are one of the few countries where the school system, the way the schools have been organized, is able to deal with the inequalities and factors that come from with the students and parents' socioeconomic background. So we have, this picture shows that Finland has been able to build both high achievement, high excellence, and also very high degree of equity at the same time, which is kind of a new thing. Secondly, let me say a few things about how we see the use of time and resources. You mentioned some of these things, how resources are important. But if you look at these pictures and some of these ideas, you see that we in Finland think very differently about use of time and use of resources. First of all, we have actually much less teaching time for teachers in Finland compared to on average, the United States primary or junior high school teachers. This means that we also have more time for teachers to work together. It's a very important part of the Finnish school day, and teachers work not only to work in a classroom, but also to work in the staff room with the colleagues. And this reduced teaching time is often used in a collaborative work on curriculum development or students' assessment or project work or whatever they do within the schools. We also have less classroom hours compared to many other countries. Not only the United States, but in the world. Finland has, together with Korea, Finland has some of the lowest classroom instruction hours for students of all OECD countries. We also have less homework. This doesn't mean that we wouldn't have homework at all, but we have a significantly lower amount of homework in Finland than in many other countries. So we don't have classes and we don't do homework. How is it possible that we are performing? So, some people are wondering about this. But we have more time to play for children. Our schools are not places for sports or team sports or competitive sports. They are all done after school. Unlike here in the United States, where the basketball or football or whatever it is a very important part of the school, and particularly high school. We don't have any of those things. The school is a place for learning and doing things, and if you play football or play something, you do it afterwards. So that's why our children are doing many of these activities outside of the classes. And then we have much less standardized testing. Actually, we don't have any high-stakes standardized testing before the last year of the high school, grade 12. Before that, the standardized tests are not employed in our system at all, which means that we have, of course, more time to learn, and we don't need to worry about teaching to the test. That is a kind of a hot topic here in this country now, how much it takes away time that should be allocated to teaching. So if you look at this, I created this little picture just to give you an idea how these three things really collaborate in Finland and the United States. You look at the money, how much money we are spending, how much time we are using, and then what are the measured results. And this is how it looks like. It's quite interesting indicative thing. So we are spending less money and using less time, but getting quite much out of the system compared to the United States, where you spend a lot of time, but your outcomes, measured outcomes, are not so good. So there's something that is a kind of a striking difference that we can talk about. And last thing I want to mention here through these pictures is the nature of professionalism within our schools. I'm referring to particularly to teachers, but also to the principals in Finnish schools. By the way, all these pictures that you see here are from the Finnish school buildings and the Finnish students and teachers. The first thing that is kind of separating Finland from many other countries is how much in demand the teacher education programs in our universities are. This is a picture from my university. I teach a little bit in the University of Helsinki, and we have, typically every year we have 10 times more applicants to primary school teacher education programs that we can take, which means that we are really able to select the best of the best high school graduates and train them in a 5-year master's degree programs to become primary school teachers. And this is a very rare case in anywhere in the world that the teacher education and teaching profession would be so much in demand by students. So I would say that teaching in Finland is a kind of a way of life. It's a very popular way of doing things. I was reading your wonderful Quality Counts report where you compare the income, the salaries, the wages of American teachers. And it was interesting to find that you were comparing teaching to, when you say similar professions, therapists, nurses, and something, I can't remember what the third was. But in Finland, if you did this comparison, you would compare teaching to law, medicine, and probably engineering or architects. You know, this is the way we see teachers work at the moment. It's a high academic, high profession, and this is how it should be. And let me close by 3 notions that I was thinking when I was preparing this opening. 3 things that, I don't know if they are wrong policies, I would probably say that 3 wrong drivers that you may identify if you look at what the countries, other than Finland as well, including Finland, high-performing countries, Singapore, one of them, Korea, Japan, Alberta in Canada, have been doing. These 3 things come to my mind when I think about what's going on here. The first one is where this wrong driver or wrong policy comes is the teacher policies. I think if we are deprofessionalizing teachers and teaching profession and thinking that anybody can teach, and if we can only have 4 good teachers in a row with a child, everything will be good. It doesn't work like this, because in Finland we believe, just like in many other places, that it takes about 10,000 hours before you are at the peak of your profession. Not only in teaching, but if you play hockey or if you play violin, if you're a medical practitioner, if you play chess, it's the same thing. This is what the Caldwell was saying in his Outliers book, right? That you need about 10,000 hours to be on the top of your career. So that's why we need to understand that teachers need time to learn what they do. And in the United States, you know that about half of your teachers leave before the end of the 5th year. And 10,000 hours means that you need to work about 10 years in the school before you can do things. So I think if we believe that by this deprofessionalization of teaching we can get somewhere, I'm afraid we cannot, because none of the high-performing countries have been able to or have been implying these types of policies. Second one is the accountability policy, which is again a kind of a top on the agenda here, as we heard from your introduction. None of the countries that I know, particularly Finland, is having an accountability policy in the school system where it would be based on individual rewards or sanctions, meaning that we would hold individual teachers or principals accountable for what they do. We believe that teaching is a collective work, it's a professional community that should be responsible for these things. In Finland we say that accountability is something that is left when responsibility has been subtracted. Yeah? So that's why the accountability is not really a part of the education policy discourse at all. We try to build school communities where responsibility would be the key thing, where the teachers and principals would be responsible for what they do to each other, parents, children, the authorities. And accountability is organized in another way. And finally, this is my last thing here, is the testing policy. I think none of the high-performing countries is really using standardized testing as a kind of a key driver or main driver of improvement, like it's happening, for example, here, where the standardized testing has so central and key role in what the schools are doing and how the system is about to improve. As you heard, we don't have standardized testing in this sense at all in Finland. Many countries like Alberta, for example, in Canada, England, in Europe, they are doing away these standardized tests. China is one of them. Singapore is replacing the standardized test with the more smarter ways of knowing what's going on in the school system. So I think that the teacher policy, accountability policy, and the testing policy are the three things that we don't have really evidence that using these as the main drivers we would get anywhere. At least none of these high-performing countries have done this. With this, I thank you and hope you enjoy the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Pasi. Okay, I'm going to do a lightning round of just really, truly 3-4 questions, and we're going to open it up to both the folks in the room as well as the folks who are joining us through the live stream. So Pasi, I've often heard you talk about the role of trust. When I was in Finland, that word was part of almost a mantra from people in classrooms and schools and the ministry. Can you talk about what the role of trust is in the education system in Finland?
Sure, yes. I think some of these things you already heard what I was saying before, that we don't, for example, employ the standardized testing, or we don't use the external inspection like in many other countries, or any external control over what teachers are doing. We don't have a kind of a centralized standardized curriculum for schools. We have a school framework. In other words, we are leaving a lot of responsibility of planning and designing what goes on in the school to the schools, teachers and principals themselves. And you should know that about 20 years ago we had a very centralized education system. There was very little trust in the system, because when I started to teach in the mid-1980s, everything was regulated by the state. So we had to do exactly as the regulations and directions told. We had a very centralized curriculum that told exactly what I had to teach tomorrow in the grade 4. So we started to take this gradually away, and basically created a system where teachers and schools have more autonomy to decide what they want to do, and that's what trust is all about.
So what does accountability, even if you don't have that word and you don't have policies to dictate what accountability systems look like, how does it ultimately play out so that if something, the calibrations need to be made to improve a single teacher or a school or whatever?
Well,
collective responsibility, I hear that, but what does that look like on the ground?
Yeah, well, practically the only means we have to deal with these things is the local leadership. So we have to rely on the school leaders, and that's why we have been systematically upgrading the preparation of school principals. In Finland, you cannot lead a school unless you are qualified to teach in the same school. So with this type of regulation, we know that each and every principal in the school understands what's going on in the school. Yeah. And we also have strengthened the local educational leadership. Most of the local educational leaders, like your superintendents, they are former principals or teachers, so they understand what's going on there. And so this leadership is one of the things locally that we have been using as a tool to make sure that things are really working. But don't make no mistakes. We have poor schools, or we have schools that are not performing to the standard that we would like to do. But the problem in Finland is that we don't have any ways to identify these, because we don't have a systematic national measurement as you have through this indicator, for example, or index that you are using here. So we have to we have to trust people, and then we have to make sure that the local leadership at the level of school and a municipality is as good as it can be.
So related to that, and something I'm particularly interested in, is the kind of public discourse and conversation about education and what the role of education is, and how we all need to be invested in it. Any advice to the U.S. on how to change that conversation? To not be one of demeaning the profession and demeaning the enterprise, but elevating it?
Well, this is a really difficult question, coming from a small country of Finland and sitting here in this huge nation of United States of America. What can I say? But one thing that I can say from the background of my culture is that since the equity and equality of educational opportunity is so important in Finland, it's a main driver still when we are asking what is a good school. The good school is the one that is providing equal opportunities for everybody to be successful. So given this, and forgive me my kind of a cultural bias here, but if you're asking me to say something, I would say that if I was one of you, I would probably think harder about this issue and aspect of equity. What does it really mean? Because this equality of educational opportunities is yet another American idea that we have been implementing in Finland, but we have interpreted that in a different way. And so if I was one of you thinking about the future of education in your states or in this country, I would probably try to think harder about what does it really mean to provide equal educational opportunities and have equity-based education system, and talk a little bit less about the excellence and achievement and competition and rankings and these things, because they are two very, very different things. And this is what probably separates our education systems quite a bit.
I'm going to open it up to questions after my last question, which is, I know the history, and you alluded to it, that it's not been long. The move from having been standardized and not having such a deep public commitment to education was not so long ago. Then there was a change, and public buy-in and political buy-in, educator buy-in. Is there any worry about sustaining that or needing to reinvigorate it? We have a conversation in this country all the time about keeping the long view or staying the course. And what's the parallel in Finland?
That's a very, very good question. Being 10 years on the top of the world is a very windy place to be. And that's why, when I look at often the American policies, where you like to set your policies by saying that we want to be the first one, we want to be the leader of these things. Based on these 10 years of experience from Finland, I would say that think twice, and maybe you should say that we want to be number 5, number 4, because you still, when you are number 5 or 4, you still have something to catch up. You have some leaders there, and you can learn something. But Finland has been there now for 10 years, and it's anybody who understands anything about politics, that if you are a minister leading the best education system in the world, you don't take any risks. You don't go there and say that let's change everything, let's go to the next level here. Most people want to keep what they have, and they just hold their chairs and say that let's hope that this will last. And I'm one of those, and my book is one of those, who will say that this is not going to work like this. Look at Nokia, our great brand still 10 years ago. Exactly the same thing happened with Nokia. They entered the kind of a situation of complacency. Yeah, we are the best and biggest, and we are selling the most phones, and now everybody else is passing them by. And it may be the same thing with Finns, and this is how things go.
The role of innovation
Yeah.
it was on your list. Okay, let's open it up. We got one here.
Yeah, I just finished last month.
Here comes a mic. We got mic runners.
I've just finished 10 years as a school superintendent in Colorado, and I'm really glad to be here in D.C. now. And how much autonomy do each of the school leaders have in the way they conduct their schools and the kind of culture that they create? In other words, let's say they want to do Montessori in one school, and they want to do a blended hybrid online type of thing, or a high-tech high, or a core knowledge. In other words, I found that especially the young generation of parents in our country want whatever they want.
Yeah.
How do you deal with, or maybe the Finnish people are all, they just trust you?
No, that's a good question as well. And we have I said that we have a kind of a national curriculum framework that is a legal document that everybody, all the schools and municipalities have to comply with. Okay? So if you want to have a Montessori school, you cannot do it. You cannot have a Montessori school just like that. You need to have a separate permission to run a Montessori or Waldorf school. Okay? But you can do all sorts of other things. You can arrange. There's a lot of autonomy at the level of the school, depending on the principal and the teachers what they want to do. But they have to make sure that the law is implied. So that's a responsibility of each municipality, and then that the curriculum framework is in place. So you have freedom, but you don't have a total freedom to do whatever you do. For example, I have heard in some of the states here in the United States, some of the students have to do part of their studies online compulsory. Right? Is it true? Yeah, I've read about this. I think this wouldn't be possible in Finland, because the law really says that every child has a legal right to have education based on their own individual needs. So I would be quite sure that there would be a lot of parents who would say that, this is not the way my son or daughter would learn these things. So I think this is where the line would probably go, that you cannot, if you go to high school, it's a probably different thing. But using, saving money, this type of thing, that you transform your teaching and learning into online and do something else, I think we would have a problem there.
We got a question right here. As the mic comes up, think about who you are and where you come from so you can say that.
Hi, my name is Joanna Ruge. I'm from the Department of Education. And I'm very interested in your comments about the professionalization of teaching and how the desirability and prestige of the profession. I think that's key to everything else that you said about trust and quality instruction and learning. Was that in place 10 years ago? Was that something that changed? Can you expand on that?
Sure, yes. No, we have prepared our primary school teachers in the master's degree programs in our academic universities since the late 1970s. So it's a long, practically all the teachers now have master's degrees. And it started this professionalization of teaching and teachers began to change soon after 1980s, when we had more teachers in our schools with a master's degree. And it's not only master's degree, there are many countries who provide primary school teacher programs based on master's degrees, but this Finnish program is a scientific research-based program. So it means that all the primary school teachers are also researchers. So they have to do a rigorous master's thesis, everybody, and they have to study the methodology and statistics and all these things so that they are really researchers, just like medical doctors are. And that's really what is the key. It's not only that you have a master's level training, but you need to have training that helps teachers to become professionals so that they not only that they understand what they're doing in the classroom, but that they understand how they should improve and develop their own work. And this is a very important part of the Finnish teachers' work, that they also are able to analyze how they teach, what they do, and how they should improve and continuously develop their own work.
Pasi, was there a public engagement campaign to promote that idea, or was it an organic thing that happened in the public to embrace that?
No, this was a technical thing, because in early 1970s we abolished the kind of a parallel education system where we had private schools and then public schools into one, what we have now, kind of a comprehensive K-9 school system. And we then understood quite correctly that in order to be able to work with these children who are coming from very different backgrounds. And in 1970s, Finland was a very poor country. We had a lot of poverty in the country. We thought that we need better, more highly educated teachers. And that's when we came up with the proposal. And this came from the academia, from the teacher education community. There were many people who were objecting this idea, saying that primary school teachers don't need master's degree because they are only teaching little children. But many people were saying that exactly this is the point, that when you work with the little children, you need to have a good education to do this.
Back here, and we have a mic.
Thank you very much. Robert Mahaffey with the Rural School and Community Trust. We're a national advocacy group that focuses on improving learning in rural and remote places. Our federal funding system through Title I is driven by number weighting. So the higher concentrations of population that are poor receive per pupil spending that's higher. So consequently, remote places receive less per pupil spending. In the Finnish funding model, you indicated that $7,100 is spent per pupil. Is that across the board? Do you make any distinctions between low population places and high population places?
No, there's a huge difference between the, for example, if you take the spending in Helsinki, where I live, which is the capital of Finland, and then you go all the way to Lapland, you know where the Santa Claus lives? They have schools there too, but they have very small schools, and some students have to travel long distances. Many of them, by the way, they travel in the taxi cabs. So those educating one child there is, of course, much more expensive than in Helsinki. They may be three or even 4 times higher the per pupil expenditure in the remote areas than in the urban schools.
What's the formula that determines that? Is it driven by population?
I don't know exactly. It's a so complicated formula that even I, as a mathematician, don't understand.
But it's nationwide.
Yeah, it's a nationwide thing. But if you want to know more about this, I'm very happy to help you to get some information how this is actually calculated.
Okay, I'm going to buck my handlers. We're going to do 2 questions, not one, and we're going to take one from live streaming as one of them. Paul?
All right, we've got a few questions in about evaluation and teacher evaluation. One of our users asks, are teachers dismissed often? What is done when a teacher is not being as successful as they should be?
Well, all our teachers are tenured teachers. So it means that if you get a teaching job, you're there for life. And it's very difficult to fire a teacher. For example, we don't have a possibility to fire somebody because of a poor performance. Because it's difficult to define what the poor performance is. So they are very rarely fired from their permanent jobs and posts. They are sometimes moved to another school or another place to work, but this is not really what we can do. So this is again another job of the school principal to make sure that they can deal somehow with these issues.
And we're going to take one more from the room, and it's coming.
Yes, I'm Larry Feinberg. I work for the National Assessment Governing Board, although this question has nothing to do with them. And but I just wondered about different ethnic groups. And when we talk about gaps in the United States, we're really referring to ethnic gaps: blacks, whites, Hispanics, Asians. I wonder, does Finland keep any figures like that? And what is the situation specifically with LAPS? I don't know what they're called now. People way up north, maybe it's indigenous area, Europeans, and with immigrant groups. I don't know whether you get many from the Middle East, Turks, and people from Africa. And just what is the situation there? Because I noticed actually you were very large within school variation. I noticed that was about as large as it was in the United States. Because between schools was much less. Within school was just about the same. So I wonder about the ethnic groups and the ethnic groups.
Yeah. So this is a
Minority education.
Yeah, this is another kind of a new phenomenon in Finland, that we are young, multicultural society. We have about 5% of our population now foreign-born, or first or second generation immigrants. And for example, if we use the OECD PISA data, that is the only kind of internationally comparable data that we can use to compare Finland to any other country, the proportion of immigrant children in all previous PISA cycles is so small that we cannot make any statistically reliable measurements. And now when the 2012 PISA data will be collected now this spring, Finland has decided to include all 15-year-old immigrant children, first and second generation immigrant children, into this sample. So this will be the first time when we have a more reliable and statistically reliable information about how the immigrant children are doing vis-a-vis the native Finns. But then we have about 5-6% Swedish-speaking Finns, and then we have the Sami-speaking Finns up in the north. And we have, according to our national data, both of these minority groups are performing worse, somewhat worse than the Finnish native students. There are different reasons for this, but I don't want to go into that.
Science and University of Michigan, there you have some stuff about University of Michigan,
Yeah,
and they're below.
yeah.
I would love to be able to keep going, and I'm sorry, but we're going to stay on track here. So please join me in thanking Pasi for being here.